So what is justice? The basic psychology of justice, the main theory that helps us understand justice is called equity theory. And it's a very simple proposition. It's that we all keep track in our social relationships. And think about your living situation. If you have roommates or a group house, we all keep track. And so what's the ratio of my inputs? How much work am I doing? And then what am I getting out of it? That's the ratio. And if Mary is getting more, if her ratio is higher, that's upsetting. So we keep track of each other's ratios. And equality is a very important kind of fairness. Equality is a special case. If our inputs are all equal, well then of course, our outcomes should be equal. So if the bottom line holds, then of course the top line holds, okay? But what about the case where you're doing more work than Mary, and Mary's doing more work than Bob, but yet your outcomes are all the same? Now in a family, we can tolerate that. But those of you who have roommates or you live in a group house, what percentage of you think that you do more than your fair share of the work and the cleaning and the grocery buying? Raise your hand if you think you do more than your fair share. Okay. And raise your hand if you think you do less than your fair share. Okay, a few. All right. So, in general, people think that people are biased. They do motivated reasoning. They think they do more than their fair share. Now, I've read a lot of definitions of social justice. It's very hard to understand exactly what the definition of social justice is, but I think there are two parts to it. So social justice activists are very focused on disparate treatment of individuals, and that is a subtype of justice. That is good. Everybody should agree that that is a thing to focus on. If people are treated differently because they are Black or gay or female, that is wrong. That is an outrage. That should stop. Somebody should stop it. But there's another part of social justice. Social justice, as I experience it, as I hear it, as I read about it, it is not mostly about disparate treatment. It is mostly about disparate outcomes. And when social justice is focused on achieving equal outcomes for all groups, then it's no longer a subset of justice. Part of it is justice, part of it is outside of justice. And if you want to understand why, let me work through an example. So in 2006, under George W. Bush, the Department of Education began prosecuting Title IX offenses. And so one thing that they noticed is that in public schools around the country, boys are disciplined, expelled, and suspended more often than girls. And the ratios are gigantic. I mean, it's often 10-to-1 or more. And so the Bush administration thought, this is unfair. This is a violation of Title IX. You can't be discriminated against against boys in this way. And so they told schools that they must eliminate gender disparities in punishment. And so what did schools do? Well, what are they going to do? They have to now crack down on the girls. If a girl does anything wrong, because girls are so much better behaved than boys, so if a girl does anything wrong, we have to suspend her. And if a boy does anything that isn't violent, we have to look the other way, because we've got to narrow that gap. So think about that. We know that boys have many more behavior problems than girls. They have many more externalizing disorders. They commit more violent crimes. They don't get their grades aren't as good. We know that boys' violation rate is way, way above the girls. And so if the goal is to make the suspension rates the same, is that fair? Is that justice? Raise your hand if you think that is a fair or just goal. Raise your hand high. Okay, nobody. Because that is an abomination of justice. Now, thank God this didn't happen. I made up the whole story. Okay, that did not happen. But what did happen is this. In 2014, the Obama administration, Department of Education, Office of Civil Rights, noticed that punishment rates are very disparate by race. This is true. And so the Civil Rights Act prohibits such discrimination, and they tell schools that they must eliminate their disparities. They send one of their infamous Dear Colleague letters warning schools, you better even the rates out or we're coming after you. And so the Minneapolis Public Schools, the administrator, the head of the public schools, comes up with a new plan that's going to make it much more difficult to suspend children of color. And of course, they're going to try to crack down on the white and Asian kids because they got to get those rates equal. So what do you think? We know that the Black and Latino violation rate is higher, not just from the corresponding crime rates outside of school, but just from the fact that boys raised without marriage, boys raised with men cycling through the home, have many more behavior problems. So we know that the rates are different. And if the goal is to equalize the rates of punishment, is that fair? Raise your hand if you think that would be fair. So this is an abomination from the point of view of fairness or justice to do that. And that's why I say that when social justice, as I see it, as we practice in this country, when social justice demands equal treatment, it is justice, it is right, it is good. And when it demands equal outcomes without concern for inputs or differences, it is unjust. And the only way to achieve those equal outcomes is through injustice. If it would simply do this, then most of the conflicts with truth would go away and we wouldn't need the schism. But that would involve committing blasphemy. So don't hold your breath.